Go ahead, call the allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I'd like to thank everyone for their attendance, and minutes can reflect the role of various trustees and staff. Let's move on to item 3, entertain a motion for the approval of the 2-7 village board and file the 110 board of public works, 111 public safety committee, 112 architectural review board, 2-7 board of public works minutes as presented.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion second, as always, comments, questions, clarifications on the minutes.
Yes, on the Board of Public Works on Monday, February 7th. I did attend. My name is on here.
Okay. Others?
Yeah, I think I had one. The last public works meeting was this past last Monday night, right? And I had mentioned to Amber about,
We
is
don't
that in here?
It's on the back.
That would be next meeting.
Yep, that would be for the Board of Public Works to take up at their
Oh,
next
okay.
meeting. Yep.
So, no, not quite yet.
Okay, motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And motion passes. Anybody in the audience or online that should be heard on a non-agenda item? Here now, let's move on to item 5. Approval of the annual impact fee adjustments. Move on, and who's taking it? Jesse?
Yes, so very quickly, I'd like to touch on a couple of things here. We're actually looking at adjustments of 2 different fee structures this evening. This particular business item deals with impact fees. The village established impact fees to offset the construction costs of the Public Works building, the police station, but then also to fund the Park and Recreational Facilities account. Those impact fees are based upon development, being quantity of units built or acreage calculations, what have you. And by code, those impact fees are to adjust annually by the Consumer Price Index. So that's a December to December snapshot. And one thing I'd like to touch on before we get further into the impact fee adjustment for this business item is to help differentiate that from the other business item that we have this evening, being the equivalent charges. The Board of Public Works has recommended a update to the equivalent charges, which is based upon a construction index, which it relates to the Consumer Price Index. But equivalent charges are fees to be used for equivalent utility main installation or for interceptor connections, primarily when the village needs to step in and take over a project for a developer. In recent past, there is no recollection of us having to actually do that. However, the reason that staff and the Board of Public Works is bringing forward the equivalent charges update in line with Consumer Price Index changes is because that is tied directly to material costs, which is different than the impact fees. So that differentiation put out there, coming back to the impact fees, and what I'd like to discuss with the village board this evening is that, again, by code, the impact fees are to be adjusted by that snapshot of the Consumer Price Index, which we are looking at a 7.5% change from last year to 2022 for those different impact fees. And the impact fees affect residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional construction. With the village looking to maintain and being poised for more development coming in the near future, I want to speak to the board this evening about consideration of a one-time variation to the code requirement. Instead of following the code recommendation of adjusting those impact fees by the 7.5%, I would propose to the village board, because the village is in a position to continue growing and in an effort not to stagnate that development by drastically increasing our impact fees, but still being responsible with the fact and of increasing the fees by a 2.5% margin instead of a 7.5% margin. I believe, and in staff discussions, we feel this is above the recent past adjustments. So we are looking to address the inflationary issues here, but at the same time, not looking to, in essence, put a wet blanket on this development or redevelopment that we are poised to see as a community. So that said, I did break it out in a table as attached to the IFC, and note that while recommending a 2.5% adjustment for impact fees in 2022, because of, quite frankly, this unforeseen market trend, if we see this again, we should revisit the code language and see if there's a better way to calculate this out. But as it sits right now, impact fees are tied directly to a snapshot of the consumer price index. And quite frankly, as a community looking to soften that increase a bit, again, looking at the development we are poised to see in the near future. So that is my recommendation this evening, and kind of a quick point of clarification between the two fee schedules that we are looking at under separate business items.
Comments, questions? Thoughts? Yes.
So Jesse, in the first paragraph, you say that it's 7.5%,
Yes,
but then down below in the last paragraph, you say 7.4%.
the equivalent charges are 7.4% because that's a slightly different index. That's a engineering news record 20 cities construction cost index.
Okay.
That's close to being the CPI, but not exactly the same. So
Okay.
there is a slight differentiation there.
And then the only other thing is when you listed equivalent charges in quotes, I didn't know if that's really how it's spelled or if it should be spelled with an A, how equivalent really is spelled.
My spell check through Windows, Microsoft Office didn't yell at me, so.
Okay. Because it's listed as spelled correctly in the second line of the second paragraph, but then
Okay,
all the other spots it's just misspelled.
okay.
And thoughts? Dave, Jim, Amy?
Questions?
Because
7.5.
And I want to stress to the board, this is a one-time look at this. I mean, one-time variation. If we experience similar market conditions at this time next year, I think we need to revisit the code and how it's calculated, because we do have a responsibility through two of these three impact fees to pay off past construction. So we do have obligations there as to what these impact fees are applied towards. So we definitely need to be cognizant of that. So I think I'm comfortable as the administrator coming forward with the one-time ask on this, but clearly if we're in anywhere close to this situation again, we need to revisit it in greater detail.
Yeah, that was the only thing I was wondering, is if you were going to check this every year then going forward.
Yes, yep.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the 2022 impact fees equaling a 2.5% increase as noted in attachment 1.
I'll make the motion. I'll second that.
Motion is second, final comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Move on, item B, before the Board of Public Works.
Public safety.
First, and then that's one item, a motion to approve $2,400 from the fire department equipment fund and $1,600 contribution from the town of Grafton to jointly purchase a treadmill with the Grafton Firefighters Association. Be approved.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any comments, concerns, questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
And move on now to the Board of Public Works, and we have a number of items. Item 1 is a motion to recommend the village board approve a contract with PRC Environmental for 2022 groundwater monitoring work as amended by staff, not to exceed $50,000. Be approved.
I'll make the motion. I'll second.
Motion is second. Any comments, anything you should add?
Very, very quickly, this is a continuation of our monitoring efforts at Lime Kiln Park primarily, but also this does pick up some of our responsibilities in an area known as the West Plume, which is nearby. We have to keep track of this under DNR regulations. We did budget the $50,000, hence the not to exceed, and we do continue to work with TRC Environmental to update our plans as to what can we do to move towards closure of this, but monitoring is first and foremost that we have to conduct.
$50,000 recommended monitoring schedule that DNR has laid out in terms of what we need with that site. But,
Yeah.
we're making
Yes. Correct. Not to dive too far outside of this service agreement, but long ago and far away, an environmental fund was established for settlement. And those dollars were used year over year for this monitoring and reporting. That fund has extinguished. That settlement money is gone. And so that $50,000 is tax levy. And so this basically is a transition to help us keep those activities going. But quite frankly, Amber, Brecken and I are trying to plan for the future and determining a more sustainable funding resource because there is more work to do. It's a very good point.
I don't think. Yeah.
Yes, we have it capped currently. It's safe to use as our park, but we do have to monitor it. Yep.
Okay. Motion and second, final comments? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. Item 2 is a motion to recommend the village board approve the First Amendment to the Stonewall Farms pre-annexation agreement as amended be approved. You want to give the details?
Sure. This is an amendment to the original pre-annexation agreement because we are looking to address the installation of that significant sanitary sewer interceptor project to serve the first phase of the development and then future phases thereafter. This did come from Board of Public Works as recommended. However, in between Board of Public Works and tonight's meeting, there has been conversations with the developer whereby paragraph 1A on page 2, there is some question, and I believe I actually do agree with a bit of clarification that should be made with that last sentence of paragraph A under section 1. The current sentence reads, the village will pay the material upgrade costs for increasing the sanitary sewer within the northern half of the development from 10 inches to 12 inches. That's to ensure, one, it matches up with the existing infrastructure up on Cedar Creek. It will also help ensure that there is no chance of surcharging in the future. But the clarification comes in that because of the method of upsizing that pipe, the installation thereof, if you're digging a trench for a 10-inch or 12-inch, that trench is the same size. What the developer is looking to do is directional bore for the installation of this. And so I think a clarification would be warranted here in that including language along the lines of that the village will pay for legitimate installation and upsizing costs as agreed upon by both developer and the village with regards from that upsizing of 10-inch to 12-inch. That way it clarifies it for everybody involved, being we understand there's extra costs because of the directional boring. There's the extra costs because of the pipe upsizing as well. And that additional costs, we agree, we would take that on because we are requesting that upsizing, but they need to be reviewed and agreed upon prior to signing off on that cost differential. So just looking to update that last sentence of that paragraph to meet the needs of not only the village, but also the developer's side as well.
Okay. All right, that makes sense to me, but I'll put it up.
And I'm just looking at a memo that came into my hands from the developer where he suggests that we consider eliminating the entire sentence. So I wanted to talk or hear from Mr. Tillman's spokesperson, Bob Rebel, who's here tonight. Bob,
Thank you, Tom.
what are your thoughts?
Well, when we first discussed this with Public Works, our position was we really didn't need an amendment at all to the pre-annexation agreement, because the pre-annexation agreement already covered things like park dedication. It covered how the costs would be reimbursed for upsizing of the sanitary sewer. Our feeling was if you just gave us direction that you wanted 12-inch pipe, that's what we would do. And those plans have been prepared and done. And then secondly, it seemed a little bit unusual to have an amendment to a pre-annexation agreement for a property that's already been annexed to the village. And so our suggestion was that those other issues needed to be addressed in a development agreement, which would be the logical next step after you annex. So our suggestion was we don't really need an amendment, but if the village wants an amendment, that particular sentence under item A that is being referred to could simply be deleted, because the upsizing cost is already, the way that's going to be determined is already addressed in the pre-annexation.
I guess if I may offer, there is a portion of this project site in which the sanitary sewer interceptor goes through that has not been annexed, which is why the amendment to the pre-annexation is the instrument that we're utilizing here. That said, just making sure to be abundantly clear with regards to what the upgrades are and whatnot. So I would argue on staff's behalf and the village's behalf that it is better to be overly communicative and overly clear about what's happening, where it's happening, why it's happening, and whatnot, versus the general language in that initial pre-annexation agreement.
Well, it seems like we're arguing the same point.
In essence, right.
The developer and the village kind of both agree that the village will be on the hook for upsizing, whether it's through directional boring or just through trenching. I mean, I think everybody's kind of in agreement here.
I thought the pre-annexation agreement was pretty detailed on how those costs would be recovered.
So I guess I'll go to the point is all of the sanitary line inside of annexed property?
No, there's a short portion of it, which is outside of the annexed property.
So now I'll still go back to we're arguing the same point. We're all in agreement here, it seems like. Anybody have any? Am I missing something?
I would address this to Mr. Treblo that what's showing up right now in the amendment, are all of those points acceptable?
Well, in the amendment, the suggestion would be from our perspective, would be to delete that sentence entirely. And if you want to have something in there to talk about the oversizing, merely a sentence that references item G of the pre-annexation agreement is the methodology that would be used for oversizing costs.
But I guess I tried to find a copy of the original agreement, and I did, but I got when talking with Jesse, I did see it, and I don't think it really didn't address 12-inch, I don't believe.
Well, I would disagree with it. I think that Mr. Tillman sent out an email which copy and pasted the section G of the pre-annexation agreement, and it's specific to any increase in cost for sanitary sewer size over 8-inch, and that would be done in that manner with taking into account the pipe upsizing costs, labor and equipment increases, to the increased depth, added costs distributing any excess spoils.
And I'm sorry, please forgive me for putting this question out there, not to muddy the waters. I do not recall if the original pre-annexation agreement also sets forth the, basically the gravel roads for maintenance. I apologize, I don't
It did
recall.
not. It
So
did
I-
not set forth the gravel roads.
But I think that's a pretty important point with this amendment as well. It's not just a matter of the upsizing. It is also a very important point that we have proper access to.
Absolutely. And that would be included on the plans, subject to your approval. If you don't see those on the plans to your satisfaction, you don't approve the plans.
I guess my question would be is, are we gonna be back in front of the board eventually then, for the areas that are not annexed?
There will have to be an annexation
So
of,
why don't we just cover that with this? I mean, you're done. I mean, then the whole issue is done and over with.
well, that section of land is not being annexed this time.
Well, I know that, I
It'll
mean,
be
at some
annexed.
point, it will be.
It will be in the future.
So I mean, I'm just looking to, let's streamline things. You see the question?
Yeah, I just had two other things that, Tom, I don't know if you wanted to speak on those. Two other clarifications that we talked about at Public Works. Do you want to?
Go ahead. if you
Okay.
wanna.
So, in the second paragraph, it talks about the temporary gravel access roads, and we talked about that at length. 15 feet wide, that was all agreed upon, shall be maintained and plowed by the developer prior to completion of the development. Obviously, that's not gonna happen after the development has been completed.
Okay, so prior to,
Whole building
Correct.
is achieved.
Yeah, right, we discussed that,
And that language was not
included.
changed or included with this amendment. that
Right.
we have
Okay.
Before us.
It's only until the development
Nope.
is completed.
that makes perfect sense.
And then the other one was the next
Next paragraph.
paragraph, G, at the very end.
Mhm.
Any remaining sanitary sewers not within roadways shall have permanent access easements, and the developer shall provide surfaces. We did not see a reason at Public Works to do any landscaping
Okay,
within these easements as approved by the village, again, until completion of the project.
okay.
Is that your understanding?
Yeah, so everything after, maybe put a period after access easement, and then delete the rest of the, and the developer shall provide, because that was not discussed. And that was
Right.
not reasonable to expect that from the developer.
Okay, and just so I'm clear, that last portion of paragraph G should read, any remaining sanitary sewers not within roadways shall have permanent access easements, and the developer shall provide surfaces within those easements, period.
That's gonna be gravel surfaces.
Right, which
One
is,
will be gravel.
yeah, it's kind of double duty, we're saying the same
Okay.
thing. I feel
Yes.
like.
Okay. Yep, that makes sense as well. Mhm.
Does that cover it, Tom?
That covers the discussion at Public Works, but I think we're still going back to the last sentence of
Yeah.
paragraph.
I guess I just don't understand why we wouldn't want to cover any and all, even existing annexation and future annexation. If it's gonna cover, if this is gonna come back to, if it's gonna come back to us, why don't we just cover it now?
Whether, is there a possibility that by the time that area is annexed in, that this developer, something happens, that he's not able to develop it, and then would we still hold him responsible, even though he may not be the one ending up doing that last phase?
Well, I think the question that, I mean, I think is everybody in agreement that the village would be on the hook for upsizing? Right?
Yes.
I mean,
Yep.
and whether or not it's material or it's direct from boring. So to me, the only question is do we want to cover future annexations or not? To me, I would rather see it just get done and we're covered for the future.
Yeah,
Am I missing something?
the point is well made by trustee Harbeck that this will be a recorded document, and
Yeah.
if Mr. Tillman is no longer the owner of these unannexed areas, those future owners will still be bound
Mhm.
to these terms versus a developer agreement with Mr. Tillman that may or may not cover areas that are not annexed.
So then what you're recommending is we take the suggestions from Board of Public Works for the second two paragraphs or whatever the additions were, and then just strike this, and that covers then, to Lisa's point, when we have a future, a potential
Right.
different future developer.
Possible.
Yes. If I could just add, the original pre-annexation agreement called for this, this interceptor sewer to be a combination of 10-inch and 8-inch pipe. And the oversizing for the 10-inch, going from 8 to 10, would have been reimbursed under that pre-annexation.
Right, I think that's kind of where the board is kind of leaning now towards, is using the recommendations for the correction, or the additions or the clarifications regarding the access and the removal of landscaping and all that kind of stuff until future, and then striking out that sentence. And I think then that covers what everybody is looking for.
Correct.
Is that okay with the board? Okay.
Or is this covered under the original pre-annex, as you're saying?
So I am, is the direction then to strike that last sentence of paragraph A
Right.
with no replacement wording? Okay,
And I have one additional question.
Mhm.
So at what point, as this project goes forward, are we going to be done with the pre-annexation agreement and go into a developer agreement?
upon annexation, because then it is part of the village and we have rights to set forth a developer's agreement.
But didn't we already do that with this area?
For phase one that's been annexed, yes,
The entire Polway property is annexed.
yes. So there is, or will be, or is an agreement there. This also speaks to the portion going to the north through township property that has not been annexed. Hence the tool being a pre-annexation agreement or amendment thereof.
Is the only
All right,
question?
so I guess what I'm hearing from everybody is we'll just deal with the property as is. And we'll just deal with a future pre-annexation agreement when it comes in 5 years.
But, you know, I feel like, okay, now it's in, that, you know, we have an area of this development in the village.
Mhm.
At some point, when we start making changes to that, and some of these things include that, we need to have now a developer agreement versus pre-annexation.
So,
What we're
so
gonna be working on soon.
what you should be doing then is making notes to include any changes that you're adding here, make sure it gets included in a developer's agreement also then.
Yep.
Is that kind of where you're going?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the past.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. All right,
Makes sense,
that being said, I will entertain a motion to approve the First Amendment to the Stonewall Farm Communication Agreement as amended.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
The
Moving to next week.
Nice.
Where it's going. Oh, yes, great. All right, let me see. I mean, actual. Okay. All right, item 3, 4.
item 3, the inspection services.
Oh, inspection. Okay, motion to recommend the village board approve inspection services for Stonewall Farm Sanitary Interceptor Sewer, utilizing our corporation as the consulting firm.
I'll make that
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any comments on that?
Yes, I just have a question.
Okay.
At any point in this motion, do we need to specify that the rates for this, motion goes anywhere from $87 to $101.11?
It really depends which staff member from DAR is on site, depending on if different qualifications are
Right.
needed, which is why there's a range. Yep.
Nothing in here at all about money again. I know.
That's been communicated with the developer. That's the board's purview is to, yeah, it is. It's completely passed through to the developer.
We can add for the our proposal.
Sure. Yep.
And there was a verbal assurance that the gentleman with all the experience is at that $87 per hour rate that we would expect to happen.
So what I'm hearing then is just amend the motion to utilizing DAR Corporation.
Yeah.
And the presented proposal.
Yep.
For their,
Second and the motion, agree to that?
yes.
Yeah, as long as the
How long
money's
are
in there.
Those rates gonna be, are they,
The 2022 rates, which,
so they can increase in 23?
but this project will do that.
And it would be a separate and distinct by policy, any project that it would exceed $25,000 must be bid out, if you will, and then brought forward for committee and board approval.
Okay, motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you. Be safe.
Thank you, good night.
Item 4, enter a motion to recommend village board enter into a contractual agreement with Symbiont Science Engineering and Construction of Milwaukee, Wisconsin to provide professional engineering services for the bidding and board construction phases of water wastewater treatment plant, chemical coagulant feed systems improvements on a time and basis, materials not to exceed $32,790 approved.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Motion is second. Reckon anything you wish to add to this?
We chose Symbiont because they did the design, so there's a consistency.
Any questions for her? Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Item 5 is a motion to recommend the village board approve the request for a 9-week time extension to business to complete lateral routing work no later than April 1st, 2022 be approved.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, any further comments, questions on that item?
I do have a question. So it's a request for a 9-week time period, but it's only 6 weeks till April 1st. Does that matter?
I think when they initially made the request for the extension, it was 9 weeks at that point to April 1st. So I guess the important part is the April 1st is what we recognize as the extension.
Okay,
So that means that we just took the 9-week time period out of it.
Yep.
So the motion should be to recommend village board approve the request to Visit Sewer to complete the lateral routing no later than April 1st.
Yep.
Before we take questions, is the motion second okay with that?
yes.
Yes, reckon, are they gonna be finished by April 1st?
That is the plan. They're just waiting for warmer weather. They need 50 degrees consistently. So
Okay, so we may see it again.
I hope not. I hope not.
Okay,
Okay,
Question here. I'm trying to remember, I think. Was that the motion that Les Bloom had made the suggestion to actually extend it
yeah.
No,
That was
that
different.
was for the headworks.
for the headworks?
Yeah.
Thank you.
final comments? Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. Item 6, a motion to recommend the village board set the following 2022 fees as listed.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Motion is second. Comments, questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes. Let's move on to C. Item C is a recommendation to approve a motion to approve to proceed with the SCADA upgrade, fire department kitchen and security system updates, highway system bridge light, and final review and approval by the village board after bids are received.
Just staying consistent with our presentation to the committee of the whole, whereby project ARPA funded projects would be brought back to reaffirm the priority set at the time the projects were identified. And yes, they would have to be bid out and brought back. This is basically a reaffirmation of the project list, so to speak.
Comments, questions?
Isn't the library supposed to be on this?
That was last year. Yep.
How much is going to be left after this balance? Ish.
About 700,000.
Yeah, so we'll be under the 750.
Correct.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Move on to item 7.
There's a second motion. Separate the practice over 25,000.
Oh,
25,000. Move to the justice that they come back and go through.
So this is a
Process.
motion to approve to proceed with the village hall phone system at a cost not to exceed $12,000.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Now let's move on to department and office reports. Jesse, I get us started.
Certainly. Kudos to Chief Rice here this evening. As part of that administrative oversight responsibilities with the Saukville Fire Department, Chief Rice successfully helped Saukville with their interview process and hiring of 2 full-time firefighter paramedics that are set to begin work in early March. Hats off to Chief Rice for helping that, but also looking at the bigger picture here, that hiring and that staffing actually helps the Saukville, Grafton, Port Washington area by bolstering emergency response coverage in general. So it's just a great thing all the way around. So kudos to Chief Rice for helping out with that and overseeing that process. Plan Commission will be taking up, and then intern staff will be scheduling 4 more piano keys in Paramount Plaza are slated for engraving. Willie Brown, LV Thomas, Lucille Bogan, and Admiral Eaton will be memorialized in the plaza this spring. With that, there are about 10, I believe 10 keys left for engraving over the coming years. Last but not least, WISDOT has informed the village that a stretch of Highway 60 from First Avenue to 10th Avenue is eligible for state-funded improvements, albeit sometime in the future between 2027 and 2030. That said, staff will be incorporating that project into our 5-year CIP to make sure that it's identified, and so we can stay on track with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation program. Director Thomas and I do have a virtual meeting mid-March with WISDOT representatives to further discuss the specifics of that program. So long story short, it's a good project that we can get involved with to have some road maintenance here in the village taken care of. So that's my update for this evening.
Okay, any questions for Jesse or the chief reference here?
Second, we had a bid opening on something. Did that happen?
We did, the coagulant tank, we got 3 bids and it came in a little high, but
All 3 did?
yeah, but we're evaluating them right now and hopefully awarding by the end of the week.
Okay.
Taking it to board.
Okay. Other questions? All right, let's move on to licenses. Entertain a motion for approval for the operators' licenses that are presented to you and their places of employment.
I'll make the motion to approve. I'll second that.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes, and then we have second a request, and that's a motion to approve the expansion of premise for the liquor license establishment in the Bridge Inn at 1216 Bridge Street for the date of March 31st from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.
If I may, this is a regular event hosted by the Bridge, an opening day tailgate party, assuming opening day happens this year. But this has been a regular request from the Bridge to temporarily expand their premise.
Entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. I'm assuming you. All right. Move on item 9, report of the bills. Entertain a motion for the village expenditures. $609,150.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
In a second, usual back and forth clarification and so on. Any further questions on the bill? Tom?
I have one question on the bills. It's batch 4, the one the CD submit. My question has to do with the breakdown of the amount of $303,681. How much was actual construction? And, Jesse So there was an answer that we received from Jesse's feedback report. Still questions. But as I look back to our paperwork here, Jesse, your answer was the application 17, 18, and 46,000 in retainage is available, but the application 18 was 346 in retainage. That, if I read the table right, the breakdown, that was a pay application, that was all retainage.
No, that's accumulated retainage
That's accumulated retainage.
that we have available to pay out the
Oh,
liquidated damages.
so that's
and penalties.
available.
That's after pay app 18, that's what we have retained,
Okay,
according to my records.
okay, then I just misunderstood that tabulator, that table that you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions on the bills? Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Item 10 is a motion to convene closed session pursuant to Wisconsin statutes 19.51C, considering performance evaluation data of any public employee over which the governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. This is the administrator's review.
I'll make the motion.
Second.
Motion is second.
Aye.
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 Aye. All right, we're in closed session. I expect maybe 15, 20 minutes, in which case afterwards we'll reconvene.
Okay, Connor has dropped off. Amy, I will leave the meeting live. However, I am stopping the recording and we will document in the official minutes as to when the reconvene happens and if any action happens and when closing out the meeting or adjourning the meeting happens.
Thank you. Okay.